Hello again. Welcome to a new session of Let's Talk About Risk. This series of videocasts that intend to bring awareness about the risk management and business continuity industry. And in that sense, we are wrapping up the conceptual first series of videos talking about risk management. And for this purpose, we are invited today. I'm very glad to have the participation of Ms. Milagros Sotelo. Ms. Milagros Sotelo is a colleague. We have worked together in a very exciting project. Just to give you a little bit of background, Ms. Sotelo is a civil engineer by Universidad Católica in Peru. She also is a PMI RMP, which is a program management certificate that verifies that she is a professional and with expertise in risk management. About her professional career, she has been involved in different type of infrastructure projects, like for example the expansion of Lima Airport. And as of today, Ms. Sotelo is the head of the risk management practice. She's the risk manager at Turner Townsend, based in Ireland. Well, obviously she works related to these different type of concepts. So in that regards, Milagros, thank you so much for being our guest today. And if you have any initial words that you want to share with us.
Thank you, Alfredo. Thank you for inviting me. Yes, as you said, I'm currently working as a risk manager here in Dublin. And yes, I've been part of different projects, capital expenditure programs also for different sectors, aviation, rail, and water. And yes, I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And we would like to take advantage of that cross expertise in different industries. And the main purpose of today is to go a little bit beyond the concepts of risk management. We have talked in our first initial sessions about different tools to manage risk, different tools to make the risk management process, identify the values of particular aspects, time and cost. And also we have talked in our second session about the crisis management role. But I want to go and use your expertise to go a little bit to the basics. Talk about how to implement the risk management plan. What are the key things to keep into account when you want to start and implementing a risk management in a project or in an organization in general?
Okay, well, it's a bit different if you're talking about implementing risk management in an organization. Maybe we're talking about something that is called enterprise risk management, which is a very, how can I say, comprehensive way of integrating or having a risk management initiative throughout a full organization. So we're talking about not only project risks, strategic risks, opportunities for investments, and compliance risks also. And that is a full set of things that we need to take into account. And also for project management, it might be for a specific project that you need to implement a risk management. Maybe, for instance, when you have a mega project and you don't have that project risk management functionality within your company, and you need to implement that. For both things, I think that I would think first of the principles that we consider for risk management, and I will use the acronym that is called PACE. So it's PACE is P for proportionate. So we need to know that the initiative that we are going to be doing, the process that we're going to be establishing, and the framework that we're going to be using for risk management is proportionate to what we are going to be doing. And then the next one is aligned. So the risk management process and the framework needs to be aligned with the other activities that we have within our projects or within our organization. The next one, it's comprehensive. Also, as I said before, it needs to be to look at the full picture, not just not work as a silo. right? And the next one is embedded. So it needs to be fully embedded in the processes. And the last one is dynamic. Dynamic, and it as a project, and as I think as everywhere, we're in constant change. Yes, so it needs to be dynamic too.
Okay.
I would think about those five
one quick question, because in base of what you mentioned, very quick. So the difference mainly in a project risk management process that an enterprise is basically the project, the limits are more clear, right? It's more focused on a specific event that is delivering the project in time and money, where the enterprise has many different angles and more complications perhaps to consider it, right?
Yes. So when you are working in a project that has its level of uncertainty and complexity, and you need to something that in enterprise is called a type of control risks. So you're working towards delivering a project within cost, schedule, and quality, and with complying with a specific set of requirements.
Right.
When you're talking about risk management for an enterprise, you're talking about not only the projects that the enterprise might be taking forward, but also some compliance for regulatory things that are mandatory that they have to do, hazard risk from operations, for example, and also opportunities, but not as opportunities as we know that risk with a positive outcome, but also opportunities that is of making maybe an investment on something, and then getting that risk back. So we are talking about a broader exercise there.
Right. And what are the main benefits of implementing the risk management system, for example?
I think that there are a lot of benefits here. And just to mention a few, I would say that, first of all, if we're talking about compliance, it means that we are being compliant. So we are fulfilling mandatory obligations. And the other one is that we are assuring that we are also delivering outputs for the project that are, I don't want to use the word compliant again, because it doesn't have to do with compliance, but that we're delivering outputs that fulfill the requirements for cost, schedule, and quality.
Mm-hmm.
We are also providing, if we have a robust risk management and an appropriate risk management process, we're also providing traceability. We are providing also consistency in the information that we use. We have we are using risk management also as an enabler for better decision making, so informed decision making, and also you can prioritize better when you know your risks, the actions that you want to take towards an issue or a risk itself, and also, well, you have visibility, because if you apply risk management and you involve people through that, and you manage to engage people in the process, you also get that ownership from the people in the team, in the project team, to kind of go and not just do a task because they're telling you do task A, but you know that this task A is coming as a consequence of an analysis, and you are adding value.
So it brings kind of the concept that you have to make the participants in the risk management process to have a buy-in, right? And sometimes that buy-in comes from top to bottom, right? So if you don't have the appropriate championship of your C-level, of your management level, really it becomes from time to time as a additional task to fulfill, but not as a consciousness that an organization or a project has to take in consideration.
Yes.
Let me bring what you mentioned is very, very interesting, and to talk about the key steps of a process. Also understanding that not all the risk management process are going to be equal or similar. They will depend, and let me know if you agree, on objectives that each company has or at each project has, right? Some companies can have more safety standards. Some company has the revenue portion. Some company has environmental. So that definition of the objective of the enterprise will define where to move and where to establish your plan. Is that accurate?
Yes, and it calls back to what I said before about the alignment. So it needs to be aligned, and we need to define the context for risk management. So, for example, what's the external context? Which are my external stakeholders? Who do I report to maybe as a public entity? Then what's my internal context? How is the company? What are the other activities that I'm going to be interacting as a risk management process? And also what we call the risk management context, which is all of this framework for the risk process. So this is what are the structure that I'm going to use for my processes. How is the communication going to be done? How am I going to do the escalation of risks? What are the specific procedures and protocols? What's the risk policy? What's the strategy behind it? Why am I expecting to get from implementing risk management? So all of this is the context that gives the risk process.
The risk process.
That's
okay. So we have the context. We define kind of the main strategy, how to go. But let's go a little bit now into putting forward the identification of the risks, right? Can you share with us a little bit of which techniques or what techniques you have been exposed to and to start developing the most common, I'll say, kind of a brainstorming, but then probably are going to be more sophisticated to bring your first initial 200 risks to the main one. So if you can elaborate on that, please.
Yes, sure. Well, first, before starting the identification, I would like to just mention quickly that planning, the risk management plan, which is a document that is usually, if we're talking about projects, it will be maybe a standalone document or part of the project execution plan, which is a typical document that we use for projects. And in that document, it will be part of the framework. So that's where you would have some sort of indication on how the process is and how is each step and how is the identification of risks going to be taking place. So, for example, what categories you're going to use, what a risk breakdown structure you're going to use, and things like that. That also will help the identification of how many workshops or with the frequency of the workshops. So now going back to your question about the techniques itself, I would say that there are many, many techniques. I can think of, for example, having workshops where you have a group of people involved identifying risks. You need to set the scope. You need to give the information, a project brief to the people involved, and then start doing the identification with mapping maybe, or well, now with a virtual environment, there are many tools that you can use. Then you can also use checklists when you have a type of checklist that it's that would say it's of common risks that you use that you have for a project, for a type of project. For example, you can use a specific set of questionnaires. You can use interviews, just one-on-one interviews. You can use a Delphi technique, which is when you do this kind of interviews, but just one-on-one or anonymous. Sometimes it's easier for people to identify risks that have a negative outcome when it's anonymous. So that's also something that we use to improve that identification.
Yeah, and I will assume that obviously the broader that you make this portion of the risk identification, the more different backgrounds you bring to the process is going to be a richer outcome, right? Because if you only do these sessions with the risk group or just with your C-level or just with the project group, it's going to be very limited. But if you start bringing people from the operation side, from the HR side, from communication, then obviously your outcome is going to be the broader, the better at the end, right?
Exactly. Yes. And it also needs to be proportionate, but yes, definitely. So depending on the project, you should be involving all the key functions. And yes, because the top level is going to provide you also with a more maybe strategic view of things. And the people who are, for example, on site, on the field, they will provide you with more of operational risks, and all of those risks will help you create or calculate your risk exposure and start doing your prioritization and start doing your mitigations and your treatment and everything. So
and in the experience that we both have together, I think also we can rescue that the value of bringing outsiders, right? People that come from not only from the organization, that will tell you the risk that they identify without any sweet covering. It will tell you right away, right? And also it will bring different views that might be biased from people inside the company because kind of the way doing things, right? So it's also recommendable to bring like we call subject matter experts, right?
Yes, SMEs. Yeah, definitely. It's a fresh set of eyes. It might be that you are doing a project that is in something very specific, so you might need that expertise too. So yeah, it's definitely always, as you said, enriching. Yes.
Let's go to talk a little bit about qualitative and quantitative risk analysis. What's the difference between both? And you can give us some principle of proportion and alignment on that.
Both techniques are, both activities are made to assess or analyze a risk. The qualitative uses qualitative value as its name says. So you might be using a scale from 1 to 3, 1 to 5, but the 1 has a meaning maybe very low, and the 5 is very high for the impact, for example, right? So you're assessing the impact and the probability. And you can say also for probability, 1 to 5, okay, very low, 1, very high, 5. You can use letters if you want, because the number itself is not really representation of something, because you're doing this in a qualitative manner. So you're assigning this value that you might be assigning. Previously to that, you might need to set, okay, I'm saying that very low is maybe a 10% probability of happening, and very high is higher than 90% probability of happening, for example. No, so you need to set a couple of things before to kind of make it easier on the attendee in the workshop who is doing the qualitative assessment.
Yeah, and you can rely
that quality.
Yeah, you can rely also on existing standards, like for example, the ISO 31000 already give you some path or good practices. But again, what you're saying also is that you don't only have that option, right? You can set it up as your need demands, right? Yes,
and actually in the ISO 31000, one of the things is that, as I said before, I said that it needs to be aligned with what you have, for example, and if a company that you are considers maybe that above 5 million or above $1,000, you need to have approval from someone. Then you will be kind of assessing those risks aligned to those other protocols that you have within the organization. So you kind of have to be aligned. It will be the ideal way of going forward. And then this is for the qualitative. And the qualitative, what you're doing, you're assessing each risk independently. So you're able to then prioritize. So that's kind of your end goal when you are talking about a project. Now let's go to a specific project, a big project. The most important outcome of a qualitative analysis would be that you will be able to prioritize your project, your risks in a faster manner. because you will have them, you will maybe use a matrix, you will be able to, see where they are and do that. And with that, you have a quicker way to see, these are my top 10 risks. And with the quantitative analysis, what you do is you put a number. So you put a value on that, but this value is either in, dollars, money, and for the case of the impact in time, is also days, months, weeks. So you're using a specific value to assess that risk. It can be, well, I don't know if you've talked about this before, about the 3-point estimates that we use for then bring that into a probabilistic model, or it could be that the organization is only using one value and just multiplying it by probability, and that's it, depending on how that quantification then is going to be done. And you start applying those, as I was saying, monetary values or time values to the risk for the impact. And also the probability, instead of saying high probability, low probability, you are putting a value for the probability in percentage or in.
No, and just to wrap up on this concept, at the end, what we understand is that there are going to be several types of risks, right? And depending on the size and resources that you have to run your risk management process, these tools will help you to prioritize and to give you a list of which risk, if they materialize, will have a bigger impact. I mean, combining probability and an outcome will give you a bigger impact. So you can apply and focus your resources on such risk, right? Because you have limited. No company has an unlimited amount of resources to put forward, right? So that's.
And when you do the
please, go ahead. No, please,
when you do the quantitative analysis, then you can calculate your risk exposure, and you have instead of just only you. Of course, you also have a prioritization there, but you also have a full set, a full value for the full a range, you could say. For the full risk exposure. Now, also, there are some risks that cannot be quantified, that maybe their impact is in reputation, and there's no specific set of for in this case, the company may not have a specific set of values to assign to what's high impact in reputation, what's low impact in reputation. So there are these cases also that you cannot quantify the risk, or that they are too high, and you don't have, you don't want to put them in your model because there might be game changers, and it will kind of corrupt the model.
The whole outcome of an objective. Yes, we discussed a little bit of that with Dr. Sander, and bringing Dr. Sander into the conversation. Let's talk about the probabilistic and deterministic model. You know, we had extensive conversation about that, and perhaps if you want to share with us, I know that in the market there are many different tools to support us, but one that we have used together is RIAT. Maybe you can tell like how a system like RIAT or other can benefit and can give you value added to your risk management process.
Yes, definitely doing a risk-based estimation, as the CVIP that we've done before, or any quantitative risk analysis, it's definitely very helpful and key to a mega project, for example. It's definitely best practice. And what it does, it gives you the quantification and the calculation of your total risk exposure. And when you are doing the estimate based on risk, you kind of have a level of confidence that you get from this model. Sure. So when you have this range, you are not talking about just one specific value. Let's say that I'm telling you, okay, Alfredo, you need to calculate your budget for your next year, how much you're going to be spending on I don't know, your life in the next year, and that number is set for you. It's impossible. We are not magicians, you know. So it needs to having this probabilistic approach and having this range of outcomes and calculating it based on risks on estimate uncertainty also, which are not risk events.
Mhm.
That also helps with having a full model and full visibility and also this consistency in what you're having, because sometimes when you have a deterministic approach, you might be even worse. You might be saying, okay, let's put just 5%, finger in
Yes.
the air, 5% for risk or 10% for risk, and that can be detrimental in some cases.
Yes, and to complement on that, yeah, and to complement on that, at the end of the day, it's not our role as the risk program, right? Our role is to tell you, management, this is the full picture. These are the whole combination of outcomes that you can have, and let's take a decision, right? And the decision mainly comes from the risk appetite or several consequences, like, or perhaps limit on financial resources, but there are several decisions, but those are not part of the risk management process. You agree?
What we are providing is the capability of taking informed decisions.
Absolutely.
And yes, it definitely depends on either the risk appetite and the risk attitude, if they are risk aggressive or risk averse, which means that they don't want to take a lot of risk. They would like to cover, they get covered from that risk. And also, as you were saying, funding and financial, so that what's the risk capacity, really? How much can they take?
Correct.
And no, it's definitely a decision that it will be taken by the PM or a higher level in management.
Mm-hmm.
We are providing the tools, we are providing that visibility and that consistency in the data and all of this. And
absolutely,
as I said, enabling this decision.
Let's go a little bit, move a little bit on the process. So you have some identification, you have quantification, you do your first analysis with the basic or the initial set of risks. Now you have an outcome that perhaps that outcome is not as satisfying as you would like. Now you go, maybe you went before, but now you go to start doing the mitigation of the risk, trying to de-escalate the impact of such risk with taking different measurements. What are the main steps of that? Like, you go risk by risk, you focus obviously what, as we've said before, through the main ones, how to establish an efficient process of rating the risks, like going through the risk again.
Yes, so I would say that once you are identifying the risks and you start the full risk assessment, you're rating the risks, but you're also ranking them and deciding which are the significant ones. This doesn't mean that you discard all the other ones. You keep a watch list also, and they are part of your risk register, but you have to handle and you have to prioritize the significant risks. And you need to start deciding on what is the next step, which would be the risk response, also known as risk treatment, and decide if you're going to be maybe taking the risk, tolerating, terminating by eliminating whatever activity or action or task that is generating or eliminating the cause of that risk.
Right.
And also treating that, which will be the equivalent to mitigating that risk. And you make those decisions based, of course, on the strategy, based on different analysis, like cost-benefit analysis. As you were saying, you might not be able to put controls for all of the risks. You will also start deciding on what controls you're going to be assigning to those risks. And also, if you are already ongoing in your project, you're not only at the start, but you are doing a reassessment, which should be done constantly when you're moving forward with your project. You should be reassessing all of the controls that you've already implemented in the past and see if they are really being effective or not, and efficient, and maybe replan those.
Replan those, yes, and then obviously after doing the mitigation, there will be risks that you can make disappear, because that's normal. No, there's that residual risk, but you know the consequences, and you know the outcome, and you monitor them, right? You monitor and you keep trying to avoid that they materialize. Just to start closing, and Milagros, thank you so much for sharing with us your expertise here. We mentioned about tools, and you mentioned that there's one called RIA. There are different, even SAP or the more popular ERPs has these tools. But okay, what are the next step after running the quantitative risk analysis, like contingency responses and controls? Maybe you can elaborate on that, please.
Yeah, well, the one that we just mentioned about looking at the significant risks and establishing the controls, the response strategy, what are the actions that we need to prepare according to those strategies, and assign those actions to an owner. So risks have owners. So the risk owner is that responsible, the person that is in the best position to handle that risk. But also sometimes these actions may not be on the hands of that risk owner. It might be that we need to assign an action to someone else. And so be clear on that communication of assignment of those actions to the action owner. Also, we have from the risk calculation itself, we have the risk exposure, and we can start deciding with, well, we can give the information to make the decision by the PM, in my case, well, by the client, that what is going to be the contingency that they're going to go ahead with, as we said before, the appetite and the capacity of risk. Right. So defining these contingencies, no, we call, well, in the PMI industry, we call it contingency and reserve, right? So sure. Contingency reserve, sorry, and management reserve. So that gives you those values, and the contingency reserve usually comes from the risk that we have identified, and the management reserve is what would come from the unknowns, which are also some sort of allowance that we have to keep for the risks that we are not identifying, because we need to be aware that we are not identifying all of the risks. And we can be very thorough with our identification.
And avoiding to consider that in your budget is just kind of delaying the hard truth, right? you don't put that reserve for the unknowns is kind of lying to yourself at stage one when they can happen. So yes, you can have that management reserve, and if they doesn't materialize, hey, savings, right? But it's good and it's better to have it there, right? Consider that you might need those resources, those funding, those financing. And if it doesn't happen, well, it doesn't happen. So one additional topic, so kind of summarizing, you can have a great structure plan, you can have a great process, right? But it's key, again, to have a management buy-in on this, a good champion on this process, and also to have it wide. So have the involvement of the different participants, of all the stakeholders, because if the risk management plan is being seen, as mentioned before, as something cumbersome and something that takes you out of your main responsibilities, then you don't have that involvement, and the risk management plan is not accurate, current, and not as effective, right?
Yes, no, there are definitely some very common barriers that we actually study, and also some actions that can be taken in place. So we definitely, one of the key things is getting a sponsor for the risk management process, and it should be better if this sponsor comes from a high level, from the board, or from a high level in the company. Yes, definitely getting a sponsor for this process is very important. Yes, there are others, as you were saying, that people would sometimes think of risk as a tick in a box kind of activity. So it's important that when we are kind of doing a resource management, and you are kind of creating a job description, that you also include risk management within the role, so that role is embedded. And also, for example, when that risk management is not aligned with how things work in a company, that's also going to make the buy-in harder. So it also making it aligned. And there are, for example, there are companies that use risk management, not necessarily for projects. I'm just talking about as an enterprise level, that they use risk management, but they don't even necessarily call it risk management. It's an enterprise way of looking at the project. But yeah,
Absolutely,
there are definitely these challenges, and we need to take some actions. Yeah.
Perfect. Milagros, thank you so much for your valuable time. Thank you so much for sharing with us your valuable knowledge. And if there is anything else or any final tip that you would like to share with our guests.
Well, I haven't thought about a tip, but I would say that risk management is a growing discipline. I would consider that risk management is going to become more and more common in projects, especially in infrastructure, and it's a great place to be.
Absolutely, it's a development process, and now with the COVID-19, the pandemic situation, it has shown us that it is there.
Yes.
Risk materializes even though you don't want to consider them. So no, thank you for that. And again, thank you so much for being part of this series of videocasts, and we appreciate your time. Thank you, Milagros.
Thank you.